What is going on, y'all? Robert Sykes, KetoSavage.com, welcoming you to week 9 of the Reverse Diet Vlog series. It's kind of crazy to think that we're already at 9 weeks post-show, but time flies when you're having fun. So, lots of interesting things happened this week. Let's dive into it. We'll start with the spreadsheet. So I woke up crazy heavy on Monday at the start of week 9, 167.5 to be exact. My average for last week was 163.2, with the goal average being 160.4. For week 9, the goal was 161.4, which is much, much lower than the 167.5 that I woke up at going into the week on Monday. Now, again, that is because, as I talked about in the prior video, I had all those rotisserie chickens the week before, wasn't really tracking my sodium. That variation in electrolyte intake and likely food intake resulted in that significantly higher weight on Monday. So I wanted to take week 9 to just kind of return to baseline, get things dialed in, stick to the basics, i.e. ground beef and eggs. I used ground venison from a deer that I had harvested the year prior, and I started weighing out all my sodium again and just getting everything back to baseline. And as a result, my weight dropped quite significantly. So again, 167.5 to start the week. That went to 166.5, 166, 165.5, 165.1, 162.1, and then I ended the week on Sunday at 161.9. So I dropped quite a bit of weight over the course of the week by simply getting things dialed in. So let that be kind of a lesson to y'all when it comes to when you're going through reverse diet. If you bring in a bunch of variability with regards to your food choices and your electrolyte intake, you're going to most certainly experience some fluctuations in fluid retention. I didn't want to see that 167.5 on the scale when I woke up on Monday, considering how much higher that is than the average goal weight that I'm targeting. But I knew that it obviously wasn't just a massive increase in body fat or lean tissue for that matter. So I knew if I dialed things back in, it should flush out pretty rapidly, which it did. So that is good to see there. I did 25 minutes at level 15 on the stairmaster. That's honestly been feeling really, really good. I typically do that on Thursdays, just kind of depending on how the week plays out. But I do my 20 minutes on the stairmaster, or 25 minutes rather, level 15, which is what I've been kind of holding steady at for quite some time now. And I can recall towards the end of the prep where that just felt brutal. It seemed like it was never ending. I was super fatigued while doing it, whereas now I enjoy it. I look forward to it. It's kind of like my disconnect me time. That's the only time I really watch YouTube videos is when I'm on the stairmaster. So I'll watch a YouTube video and the time flies by. I feel powerful. I feel good. I don't feel fatigued at all. So that's a plus. I've also been continuing my posing. I actually started posing for 30-second holds throughout all my mandatory poses this past week just to ensure that I've still got that dialed in and everything's looking good with that, so no worries there. So having that consistency has been good for me. As far as the macros go, I started the week at about 210 grams of fat, 200 grams of protein, 15 grams of total carbs for a total of 2750 on the calories. And I had the one scheduled refeed on Friday, which wound up being about 208 grams of fat, 287 on the protein, 28 on the total carbs. Since I've got so much locally sourced meat in the freezer, I've been kind of dabbling into that for my refeeds. And as a result, it's mostly leaner because it's not raised through the conventional system. So my protein's been a little bit higher than it typically would be on these refeed days, but my body seems to be responding fairly well to it. So that brought me to a caloric intake of 3132. And just to give you a visual as to what that meal consisted of, actually, the normal day-to-day this week has been as follows. I've had the Nut Pods head cream in my coffee, 1 brick, and then about 15 and a half, 16 ounces of venison, 10 eggs, and cod liver that I pour into the skillet there. That's been what my normal meals have consisted of this week. On that refeed day, the Friday, 19th, I incorporated some of those locally sourced meats, had some uncured ham steak, had some lamb chops, some pork chops, and some sirloin steak. That's what my intake was on Friday. Now, when I go back to the spreadsheet here, I went back to the normal intake on Saturday, but Sunday I was feeling a little bit ravenous, so I had a little bit more food. This was not a planned refeed, but since my weight was dropping so drastically, I felt it fine to go ahead and have a little bit more of an intake. This weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I spent the whole time outside working on the fence, so digging holes, pouring concrete, and just hustling it, working. And I burned a lot more calories than I typically would, so I felt the additional refeed on Sunday was justifiable, especially in context of my weight dropping like it had been, so no worries there. That intake was about 34.97 on the calories, and that meal consisted of, let's see here, some heavy cream in a coffee, some additional venison, and then some pork jowl. Had some deer testicles from a deer that I'd harvested. I wanted to fry one of those up and see what it tasted like, and it was delicious. So I had one of those. Not my normal meal there, but it was tasty nonetheless. I had some freeze-dried beef heart and some deviled egg, one deviled egg that Crystal had made using some Primal Kitchen avocado mayo and some chicken thighs. So that was my intake for Sunday, so a little bit higher there. But again, even with those 2 refeed days, my average intake across the course of the week was about 29.11 on the calories, and I'm averaging around a 67% fat ratio this week. So pretty moderate fat intake, 67, 70% is kind of where I hang out in the building phase. And just to see how my weight has responded, dropping as low as 161.9, which is not far off of the goal target weight of 161.4, I definitely feel like I'm getting closer to that phase 7 transition. I'm not nearly as food focused anymore. On Sunday, after all that activity, I definitely was hungrier, so I was a little bit more ravenous and thinking about food more, which is why I had additional food. But generally throughout the week, I'm not nearly as fixated on food as I was several weeks prior, which is a really good sign. Generally, when you switch from phase 6 to phase 7, you need to, objectively look at the fact that your refeed intake needs to start getting much closer to your daily intake, which it is. 3,100 calories here, 3,400, basically 3,500 calories here. That 2,750 is definitely much closer to that 3,000 point. So that's an objective measure. The weight obviously is an objective measure, but then a subjective measure would be just simply, how are you thinking of food? What's your relationship towards food? Are you constantly thinking about it at all times? Or are you starting to just return to some degree of normalcy and not let it be the primary focus of your day-to-day, which is not what you want it to be, because there's more important things in the day than just simply thinking of food. And I've been so busy lately that I haven't really been just fixated on food, so that's good. All that to say, I think I am definitely nearing the phase 7 transition here. So tentatively, I had planned on doing about 220 grams of fat, 205 grams of protein, and 15 grams of total carbs for the week 10. I may bump that up a little bit. I'll definitely let you know when we talk about week 10 next week. But based off of my weight, based off how I'm thinking of food, I may get a little bit more aggressive with that intake and then just simply phase out the refeeds altogether and kind of settle out around that 3,000 point for a week or two and just see how my weight and body responds. I've been really pleased with my workouts. All of my lifts are going up. I feel very strong and powerful in the gym. My recovery has been rock solid. I'm tracking all my lifts now with a workout app that I'm in the process of building out. More on that later. But all of my lifts are going up. Progressive overload has been no problem whatsoever. And I feel really, really good with my training, with my cardio, with my relationship with food. So I'm certainly in the stages of transitioning to that phase 7 and beyond, where there is less acute manipulations like with refeeds and more just an even keel, solid intake with ample fat, ample protein, and a steady increase in total calories, so as to ensure that you're able to build more lean tissue as you transition into the building phase. So feeling really good about all of this. I did take some pictures on Monday, which again was my heaviest weight of 167.5. So I am most definitely holding some fluid in these pictures, but let me go ahead and pull some of these up here. Even with the fluid retention, I still feel pretty dialed in. I feel full. I don't really feel like I've lost much definition from a muscle separation standpoint. My skin is a little bit thicker due to that fluid retention, but you can still see, all the lines throughout the legs, the calves. I still got the vascularity in the biceps, still separation in the chest and the pecs here. So I feel really good about all of that. Again, I am just holding more fluid in the midsection, especially because this was taken, and on my cheeks too. My cheeks are a telltale sign. I always have a very fat-looking face when my body is holding fluid. But all that to say, with these pictures being taken on Monday at 167.5 and carrying all that additional fluid, I still feel pretty good about how things are looking. I still have vascularity in my legs, still have the striations in my glutes. And again, if I were to take these pictures now, having flushed out all of that water, that definition would be even more prominent. So I'm feeling really good about how things are progressing. I feel like my body is staying at this leaner conditioning much easier than it had been in the past. I went back and looked. Actually, let's just do that real quick. We'll go back and we will look at some spreadsheet data from my 2020 prep. So if I go, all this screen bouncing around, Chip, just cut this out so we don't see any of this client information stuff. All right, so just for grins here, this is my spreadsheet from 2020. I started the prep at 177.5 and actually started a higher caloric intake of about 3,445 calories. But if you can tell, I cut down until 3/28, 2020. That was when I did the photo shoot. 2020, all my competitions got canceled due to the pandemic. But I only got down to 166.4. So I got significantly leaner with this 2023 prep than I did in 2020. But at that point, my average intake going into it was 1955, 1972, 2152. And then I had more calories there after the photo shoot was done. But I started looking at some of this weigh-in data, and I was already at 171.9, 173.8, so back into the 170s, which I haven't even touched yet, just a few weeks after that apex of the 2020 cut. And my average intake throughout the week was, pretty high, 2,478, 3,100, 3,000, 3,200, 3,500, 3,900, 3,800. So I bounced my calories up quite a bit more aggressively with that 2020 prep. And a lot of this was coming from just me not being as mature as I am now as a bodybuilder and not being able to exercise as much restraint around my intake post-show and prep. So I feel really good about having managed that much more strategically with this 2023 prep. Because again, when you look at the spreadsheet from this prep, I've had some high days for sure, but if we go back to my last show, 152.3, so significantly lighter than I was in 2020. And then, average intake in the weeks leading up to that was not really lower than it was in 2020. And then looking at the intake post-show, average of 2854, 2879, 3400, 3300, 2600, 3100, 2900, 2800. So just been able to maintain a lot more rigidity and just, be more gradual with the reverse diet, which has let me maintain that conditioning for a bit longer. But again, I don't feel like it's hindered my ability to perform in the gym or feel great overall. And that is something I'm very proud of. I've had a few days where I've probably overindulged a little bit. I've tracked everything. I've been transparent with y'all with everything, but not near as much as I had in that 2020 prep. So that just kind of is an illustration of how I've matured as a competitor since that 2020 prep and how this has become a more sustainable process for me. And I've done this several times now, so keep that in mind as y'all go through this journey on your own. The first prep and the first reverse diet is going to be the hardest because you don't have that perspective. But as you do it over time, more and more, you gain that perspective, you gain that maturity, you gain that confidence in yourself, and you can kind of know and listen to your body and your brain and figure out at what rate of increase is the most realistic and sustainable for you. So all in all, I feel very good about it. Again, Week 10 next week may see the beginning of phase 7, or I may introduce one more refeed, which I have not calculated the macros on yet. I'm going to be traveling for the Metabolic Health Summit in Florida next week, so I may incorporate a refeed at some point while I'm doing that. But again, I'll let y'all know what I wind up doing in next week's video. That is a recap on week 9. Appreciate y'all for tuning in. We will talk to you next time.